Hæ, verið öll velkomin á rásina mína, lærum íslensku, or hello, or welcome to my channel, Let's Learn Icelandic. The goal of this channel is to teach you Icelandic, of course, and we have many lessons so far, but this one will be slightly different because I'm going to explain a little bit about my philosophy of this channel. In my real life, I am a scientist, something to do with the natural sciences, nothing to do with languages. But as a scientist, I like working with a model, and now I'm going to explain to you the triangle of language learning, or tungumála þríhyrningurinn in Icelandic. I'll repeat, tungumála þríhyrningurinn. Tungumála þríhyrningurinn. Tungumála þríhyrningurinn. Or for short, you can also call it just þríhyrningur ásur. It's a super simple model, the simplest model that I could think of to try to wrap my hand around how we learn languages. It's not tested in a scientific sense, but it's just based on my own experiences with learning many different languages of varying degrees of success, let's say, and common sense. But like Dr. Phil says so eloquently, common sense is not so common anymore. Tungumála þríhyrningurinn, or the triangle of language learning, if you will, is actually, like the name suggests, it's just a triangle with three equally important sides. Okay, at the base of the triangle is structured learning. Okay, by structured learning, I mean everything that where you sit down and you want to learn something specific. This is what I call a structured learning. When you're following a course, following my lessons, doing anything specific, learning, let's say vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, anything like this is what I called structured learning. And this is the base of our triangle. Then comes a very important side, which is the input. Okay, so input. And when I talk about input, then I mean you listening or reading the language, basically absorbing the language. And I mean this in an unstructured way. Okay, so you might be listening to the radio, you might be reading a book, you might be, I don't know, watching a TV show. So you're basically absorbing the language, but you're not trying necessarily to learn anything specific. You're just getting a lot of input, absorbing it, learning it through osmosis in some sense. Then the third and sometimes the most difficult but a very rewarding side is the output. So by output, I mean anything that comes from your own. It might be when you try to speak, form your own sentences, or for example, if you write something down, if you have a diary, or for example, if you try to comment on my videos with your own words, with your own sentences, this is something that we call output. Okay, so now we have the whole triangle. It's really that simple. If you want to become fluent in a language and you want to speak it correctly and know it correctly, then you have to really nurture all the sides of the triangle, meaning the structured learning, input and output. But here comes the important part. From the moment that you decide to learn a language, you should be nurturing each side of the triangle. Okay, this is the way that you will learn the language most efficiently. This means that you should do some structured learning. You should make sure that you absorb as much of the language as possible with input, and you should try to get something from your own heart right from the start. Because if you neglect one side, the triangle will crumble. And the thing is that each side supports the other sides. Okay, I think it's obvious when you have structured learning that this will help you both with the input and output. I think this is obvious, and this is how we're taught in schools and so on. But if, for example, you have a lot of input, you listen to a lot of Icelandic, even though you don't understand all of it, you start to recognize the sounds, you start to recognize the sentence structures, you start to recognize certain grammar patterns, even though you don't know what they mean. So when you then encounter these grammar patterns in your structured learning, they will be so much easier to acknowledge and learn, and they will sound much less abstract because you've heard them many times before, even though at the time you didn't understand completely what was going on. Later it will help you a lot. And obviously a lot of input will make it much easier to do the output, to try to talk, because you've heard the sentence structures before, you've heard the words, the sounds, the pronunciation, and this obviously will help your output. And in the same way, if you try to do some output, this will help your structured learning and your input. Because if you try to say something and fail, then you will realize that you're missing the tools to say exactly this thing that you will want to say. And then you can either look it up by structured learning, or when you come to it with your structured learning, you will say, aha, this was important, I needed this. Then you will pay much more attention. This will be much more exciting for you to learn this because you see the value of this. Suddenly a grammar isn't something abstract, but something incredibly useful that will help you to communicate whatever you want to communicate. And in the same way, of course, if you try to say something and you realize that you're missing the way to say it, then when you hear it via your input, then you'll take note, and then you'll be much quicker to pick something up compared to just hearing input without ever trying to say something on your own. So all the sides are super important, and all the sides should be nurtured to some degree at each time of your study. So this is sort of the philosophy behind why I do what I do and how I do it. Of course, disclaimer, I'm a one person, I'm doing this as a hobby, my budget is 0 kronor, 0 kronas, so this will take me a long time to build up a substantial database of lessons, but this is my end goal, and I hope you'll stay with me as I try to muddle through. But basically, based on this triangle, this is why I try to make some lessons that are more or less structured, but I also try to provide you with some input, something where I just speak and you just listen, and you might not understand everything, but that's okay. To help you further with the input, I just made a Twitter account, so it's in the description. So please subscribe, follow, or whatever it's called on Twitter. Right now it's quite quiet, but assuming I get some followers, my aim is to maybe occasionally, when I have some time, to make something simple, like maybe write simple sentences, maybe occasionally make something like the word of the day, just trying you to get to read a little bit of Icelandic, to see it just as an add-on to my YouTube channel. The thing that is most difficult for me to help you with, this is obviously the output. And this is also something that in general is often difficult when learning languages. Depends on your personality, of course, but for me it's always the most difficult thing is to try to speak. So I have tried to sort of fill in the angle between the structured learning and the output by giving you homework at the end of each lesson. So basically homework at the end of each lesson. And this will sort of help you to start to at least fill in words and hopefully start to write some sentences as we get further and further along. Today we will not have a formal homework as such, but what I want you to do is to look at your language learning and see how you might balance your triangle better, to try to get a more balanced approach, because this will make you more efficient. So I have 3 things that I personally think that you should take into account when trying to balance your triangle. And the first one is, or nummer 1, markmið. Number 1, your goal. Okay, so think about what is your goal, maybe your short-term goal or your long-term goal. If your short-term goal is to do something like learn the days of the week, then structured learning is the only way to go. The other ways are stupid. If, for example, you want to learn how all the prepositions work, something like this, then you might want to focus very heavily on input, because this is something that requires a lot of listening to and a lot of sort of absorbing and getting a feel for the language. If, of course, you want to be able to say something to a person or be able to express something simple, then of course you need to really practice the output. Nummer 2, personleiki þinn. Personleiki þinn, or your personality. Okay, you should personalize your triangle to some degree. Okay, this means that if you hate staying still, if you just absolutely cannot stay still, and you cannot, structured learning is really difficult for you, then you should just go out, try to speak to people, try to put emphasis on the things that suit your personality. And in the same way, if you have really difficulty speaking to people, then maybe it's good in the beginning to put slightly more priorities to structured learning and so on. But you should take this into account, but be willing to step out of your comfort zone, okay? Be willing to step out of your comfort zone because árangur besti hvatinn. Árangur besti hvatinn, or progress is the best, how do you say this in English? Progress is the best motivator. Okay, progress is the best motivator. So if you improve your Icelandic or improve whatever language you're trying to learn, this is the biggest motivator. Because if you manage to go get ahead and improve, this is what really will motivate you to learn more, and this is really the fun part. So take into account your personality. I would not dismiss this. The same methods do not work for every single person, but slightly push your envelope of comfort, because this will mean that you will learn more, that you will progress faster, and árangur besti hvatinn. Nummer 3, gaman, or in English, fun. And this is so important. This is so important. For example, let's say you're a big fan of Halldór Laxness, which is our famous writer that got the Nobel Prize, and all that you want in life is just to read his novels. And then you just start by reading one novel at page 1, even though your Icelandic is crap. This is something that I would not recommend for any beginner ever, because his spelling is weird and it's just a really complicated way to start. But if you love it, and if you absolutely love it, and you're so enthusiastic, and you try, and you're so impressed by every single sentence that you manage to read, and this is a big motivator for you, then go ahead. I mean, absolutely go forward and go with it all the way. Because let's say one page in a book of Halldór Laxness that you actually read is worth more than 30 children's books that you will never read. So make sure to take into account what motivates you, what is fun for you. If you like Icelandic music, make sure that in your input is a lot of music. If you like Icelandic books, try to find a way to read a little bit of this. If you like sports, try to follow Icelandic sports, things like this. Even though in a sports game it's not the most varied vocabulary, let's say, one sports game that you actually watch and understand maybe half of it is better than 30 lessons on YouTube that you never watch. Okay. And this brings me to another very important point, and my last point of today. Eitthvað betur en ekkert. Okay. Something is better than nothing. Okay, and this is very important. So if you do something with the language, listen to it, try to speak it, whatever. Something is better than nothing. Eitthvað betur en ekkert. And what I mean by this is that, let's say you make a goal and you don't manage to fulfill all of it. And you wanted to learn this much and you only managed to learn this much. You wanted to watch 10 episodes of Icelandic TV, but you only managed to watch 1. I mean, who cares? You did something and it's good. What will never work is to beat yourself up over things that you didn't do. This will never help you in any way. So just always be happy with what you did and not unhappy with what you did not do. Okay, one final note, or maybe two. Okay, I'll just speak and then it will end at some point, I promise. If you're having problems with starting to do some output and you don't know where to start and you don't know many Icelandic people and so on, first of all, do the homework. It's not officially output, but it's a start to do something, to try to get something from yourself. You could also try to do, maybe have a diary or just try to say something out loud, and also try to comment on this channel or potentially on my Twitter feed when I get that started properly. And it doesn't matter if it's wrong, just try to find a way to get your ideas across, because you will learn also from making mistakes. It's the motto of this course: mistakes are encouraged. That being said, I just want to be clear that I will probably not correct your Icelandic when you comment, unless in some specific cases, maybe because I think it's something that is specifically useful to correct or something like this, because I don't want the thing that whatever you try to speak, you always get like the response, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. I don't want to discourage you from learning Icelandic, speaking Icelandic. I don't want you to feel discouraged whenever you try to speak, and whatever you say is perfectly understandable. There will always be some minor mistakes, and I don't want you to focus on the mistakes. If you want me to tell you if what you said was correct, then just tell me to correct you in English, or you can be more sophisticated and put in Icelandic in parentheses or something like þetta rétt íslenska? Þetta rétt íslenska? Is this a correct Icelandic? But it's always perfectly acceptable that you don't care about correcting the details. You just want to practice getting the things out, trying to say something in Icelandic and so on. So by all means, if you know to say a little bit in Icelandic, but you want to say more, write a little bit in Icelandic, write the rest in English. No problem at all. Just try to push, try to say something in Icelandic. So that's it. Finally, I promise, just keep the triangle of language learning in mind, or tungumálaþríhyrningurinn, keep it in mind. Just keep it in mind, and every now and again, just ask yourself, especially if you feel like you're if you're not really progressing as fast as you would like to, something like this, just think about the triangle and see if there's anything that you can improve to balance your language learning experience better. That was all. Þetta var Ása. Takk kærlega fyrir að hlusta á mig og sjáumst í næsta þætti. Bless, bless.